Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Obeka Brute Chronologist. So Obeka is a 4-mana Grixis commander. It's a 3/4 and it says tap. The player whose turn it is may end the turn. So obviously this can apply to any player, but because it's optional, I assume your opponents are most of the time not going to opt to end their turn. So really this is more focused on just having you end your own turn, which we can use mostly to stop our own detrimental triggers. So if we have a card that's going to be a detrimental trigger for us, maybe it makes us sack something, maybe it makes us discard, maybe it makes us lose the game, we can use Obeka to stop that detrimental trigger. So before we get to that, just going through the rest of the deck, we've got our normal card draw spells with some additions like Faithless Looting, Flame of Anwar, which doubles as a shatter / 5 damage to a creature. And we've got Fable of the Mirror Breaker, more on the backside of Fable with Obeka later. We've got combo pieces, which we'll get back to. We've got our counter spells. We've got extra turn spells, again, more on that later. Fast mana. Then, of course, we do want Obeka to be able to be activated immediately. So Hall of the Bandit Lord and Torch Courier can give it haste. Lightning Greaves also gives it haste and protects it from removal spells. Then we've got our various Grixis lands, some additional protection and deflecting SWAT, a bunch of ramp cards, some reanimation effects in Apprentice Necromancer, Feldon, Reanimate and Victimize, a little bit of removal and sweepers, and then synergy cards, which is basically cards that synergize with Obeka but may or may not outright actually combo. And then a bunch of tutors, which include direct to the graveyard tutors for our reanimation effects. So first, let's go over the synergy cards. So we have a number of these extra turn spells in Alchemist's Gambit, Final Fortune, Last Chance, and Warrior's Oath. All of these cards say that you get to take an extra turn, but then you lose the game at the end of that turn. So obviously we can remove the trigger based on using Obeka. So we cast one of these, we take an extra turn, and then when we get to the end step of that turn, the lose the game trigger goes on the stack, we activate Obeka, the turn ends immediately, we exile the trigger off the stack, and we don't lose the game. Next is Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So Reflection, on the Reflection side, we create a token that dies at the beginning of the next end step, so we can stop that from happening as well. There's also Ideas Unbound, 2 mana to draw 3 cards, but we have to discard 3 cards at the beginning of the next end step. This is, again, a trigger that we can stop with Obeka. Then we've got Twin Flame, which, like Reflection, creates a token copy of something, and then that token, it gets exiled at the end step. We can stop it with Obeka. Feldon of the Third Path does something similar. 3 mana tap, create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste. Sack it at the beginning of the next end step. And notably, unlike other cards that do something similar to this, Feldon does not exile the creature out of the graveyard. It just makes a token copy of it. So we can keep doing this every single turn with Obeka stopping the sack trigger on end step from occurring. And then another interesting card is Psychic Vortex. So this is a 4 mana enchantment that says cumulative upkeep, draw a card, and at the end of each of your turns, sack a land and discard your hand. So basically, turn 1, this doesn't do anything. Then the next turn, a counter goes on it. We get to draw a card for the cumulative upkeep, and then draw more and more cards every turn after that. It is pretty slow, but it goes very well with Obeka. So if you've got an Obeka in play, you can just activate it to stop your turn. Then you never wind up actually sacking the land or discarding your hand. Now, of course, one thing to note with any of these effects is obviously if our opponent has a way to kill Obeka before we get to the end step or before these triggers go off, it's obviously very detrimental. If you cast a Warrior's Oath, then you're going to lose the game, and then the opponent just kills Obeka before you get to your end step, then you lose the game. So do make sure that you have necessary counter spells or other forms of protection before you actually go for any of these cards. Now, as far as combo cards go, we have a lot of them, and we can do a lot with them. So first are just combos that don't necessarily involve Obeka. So we've got Kiki-Jiki in our deck, and we can obviously combo it with anything that untaps Kiki-Jiki. In this case, we've got Coercive Recruiter. Whenever Coercive Recruiter or another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it. Until end of turn, it gains haste and becomes a pirate. So Kiki-Jiki, obviously, you make a copy of Coercive Recruiter. It targets Kiki-Jiki, untaps Kiki-Jiki. You target Coercive Recruiter, etc. You make infinite Coercive Recruiters. You can attack your opponent for infinite. We also have Twin Flame plus Dualcaster Mage. So if you've got Twin Flame targeting one of your creatures, you can hold priority, cast Dualcaster Mage. It enters, copies the Twin Flame. The new Twin Flame copies Dualcaster, which enters, which copies the original Twin Flame that's still on the stack, etc. You make infinite hasty Dualcaster Mage tokens. you can attack your opponent to death. We have Sundial of the Infinite, which is basically just a backup Obeka. It has the exact same effect Obeka has, but on a 2-mana artifact that activates for 1 mana. So if our Obeka is not online, we can use Sundial instead. We also have Splinter Twin, which is basically another Kiki-Jiki. We can put the Splinter Twin on the Coercive Recruiter and then Coercive over and over and over to make infinite tokens. Same deal with Combat Celebrant. Combat Celebrant takes an extra combat step, but you have to exert it. Doesn't matter though, if you can make copies of it with Kiki-Jiki or Splinter Twin, then you can go infinite. Then we've got Time Stream Navigator. So Time Stream Navigator is a 2-mana 1/1. It has Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing. And then it's got 4 tap, put Time Stream Navigator on the bottom of the library, take an extra turn after this one, activate only if you have the City's Blessing. So obviously, if we've got Kiki-Jiki or Splinter Twin, we can make a copy of Time Stream Navigator. The Time Stream Navigator copy can then be activated, taking an extra turn, leaving the original Time Stream Navigator still on the board, etc. Repeat for infinite turns. We also have Isochron Scepter, which can pair up with Final Fortune. So if we've got Isochron Scepter, Final Fortune, and Obeka or Sundial of the Infinite, we get to cast a Final Fortune to take an extra turn with the Isochron Scepter. We then, at the end of that extra turn, simply counter the ability with Sundial or Obeka, and then we can keep activating Isochron Scepter on the extra turns to keep taking extra turns. Repeat for infinite turns. Similarly, with any of our extra turn spells, we have Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch. This is a 4-mana Izzet creature, 2/4, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, you return an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard to your hand, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So, if the only instant or sorcery spells in our graveyard are these extra turn spells, which we can affect to some degree, we will get one of those back. We can then cast it. We can then use Sundial or Obeka to stop ourselves from dying at the end of that turn. And then we can keep getting this back with the Exalted Flamer every single turn. And similarly, if we can loop Archaeomancers, we can keep Archaeomancing back Final Fortune or Last Chance, etc. to keep going off in that regard. We do have to find a way to keep copying Archaeomancer, but if we've got again, a Kiki-Jiki or a Splinter Twin, we can simply copy the Archaeomancer. It will enter, get us back one of our extra turn spells. We take an extra turn. At the end of that turn, we use Obeka or Sundial to stop the lose the game trigger. We untap. We get to copy the Archaeomancer to get it back again and keep going for infinite turns. This also applies to Feldon. So if we have one of these creatures that's a combo creature in our graveyard, like let's say Combat Celebrant, Archaeomancer, etc., we can use Feldon every turn to get the card back and combo off that way. We can Feldon a Time Stream Navigator, Archaeomancer, Combat Celebrant, etc., win the game that way. Then we've got Magar of the Magic Strings. So this is a 3-mana Rakdos creature. It's a 3/3, and it has pay 3 mana in Rakdos colors. You note the name of target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard, and you put it onto the battlefield face down as a 3/3 creature that has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may create a copy of the card with the noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So basically, it takes an instant or sorcery out of your graveyard and puts it onto the battlefield as a face-down creature. That's a 3/3. And then when you deal combat damage to a player with that creature, it gets to copy whatever spell it is for free. So, same deal. If you get Last Chance, Final Fortune, Warrior's Oath, Alchemist Gambit out of your graveyard with the Magar, and then you have an opponent that you can attack them, you get a free copy of the extra turn spell. At the end of the extra turn, before you lose the game, you use Sundial or Obeka to stop the trigger, and then you just keep hitting your opponent over and over and over with the same spell. And this, of course, applies to any spell in your deck, not just the extra turn spells, but it specifically will combo with the extra turn spells. But you can, of course, do it with other things as well. So, for example, if you exile Twin Flame, then you get to Twin Flame copy something, such as the creature that the Twin Flame is. And then you can just keep taking, not extra turns, but you can keep the token from dying using Sundial or Obeka. Now, of course, there are other cards not pictured here, as there usually are, that can do other combos. Like, there's about 10 million creatures that combo with Kiki-Jiki, so you can pick the ones that you either prefer or add in more copies. Like, if you don't think Coercive Recruiter is enough copies for Kiki-Jiki, you can add more in. But I think this is a good representation of the kinds of combos that you can do here. For example, maybe you don't want all 4 extra turn spells. Maybe you think just Final Fortune is good enough, and that's fine. You can customize the deck however you want, but this is the main thing you'll be doing. So another thing with Obeka is that you don't necessarily have to go on down this combo route, as there are a lot of creatures that have the what I'll call Geist of Saint Trapped ability, which is they create a token copy of themselves or of something else, and then that token copy dies or it gets exiled on the end step or during combat. But you can use Obeka / Sundial of the Infinite to stop those tokens from going away. So there's plenty of creatures in the Grixis colors that have like Myriad or just produce tokens that are temporary. Maybe you could have Sneak Attack in the deck, etc. There's other things that you could have in this deck that Sundial and Obeka would go well with. So again, figure out what combos you want and then put them in the deck as needed. But I think for the most part, this is a good representation. So we also, of course, have cards like Apprentice Necromancer that only brings back a creature temporarily, but then you can keep it around forever using Obeka and Sundial. And there's just like other random cards in the deck. Reflection of Kiki-Jiki is no regular Kiki-Jiki because you do have to pay a mana to activate it, but it can do the same kind of thing as regular Kiki-Jiki. And if you can find a way to generate extra mana, then you can also do the same thing. So for example, the regular Kiki-Jiki can still or the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki can still combo with anything that you only need one token for, like Archaeomancer plus extra turn spell, etc. Or you can just use it for value. So the main thing you're going to be doing is playing a typical Grixis plan with some of these card advantage spells, and then you're trying to get one of these combos down as fast as possible. Most of the combos revolve around having creatures in play, so you do want to potentially reanimate them as part of the game plan. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty much what you'll be doing with this deck. So that is Obeka Brute Chronologist.